Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Women's Wisdom Conversations. Today, I've got Jo Whitton with me. Jo is a lady that I discovered probably about 8 or 9 years ago when I first got my Thermomix and was looking at creating some delicious allergy-friendly food, actually. And I discovered Jo's recipes were quick, were simple, and the best part, delicious, and the family was really, really happy to take part in that food. So I followed Jo for a number of years, and I've had the great pleasure of meeting her a few times, especially when I was far north in Australia and got to catch up with Jo on her home turf. So as you can see by the way we're dressed, we're now on opposite ends of the country. I'm almost as far south as you can go, and Jo's almost as far north as you can go. So we're a little extreme in our garb today. But anyway, I just wanted to bring Jo on board. She is just a wealth of knowledge when it comes to food as medicine, tasty food, recipe developing, gut health. So many bows to your strings to your bow, and it's just a real pleasure to have you here, Jo. So I've given you an introduction. So what would you like us to
know about you? Oh, well, I live in far north Queensland, west of Cairns, up in the mountains, and it's a beautiful place called the Atherton Tablelands. I have 4 kids, and they're pretty much grown, 22, 20, 18, and 16. I cook a lot, as you probably know.
Indeed.
And I have no help at the moment because of COVID, so we're at home without my sister usually comes and helps twice a week with recipe development and cooking, and she can't come over right now. So I'm also running my business from home, and it's pretty full on at the moment. So yeah, keeping up with food for 7 adults. I say 7 because my son, who's 20, eats enough for 2. And you know, working away on the computer and in the kitchen every day. So yeah, it's pretty full on, but I do love living here in far north Queensland, and it's a very good place to sit out COVID because we are surrounded by beautiful nature, can go for walks, and it's very peaceful. So I'm actually not really that bothered by it.
It is a really beautiful part of the world. I can vouch for that. So,
yeah.
And as you list the things that you're doing and the challenges that you face at the moment, I'm certain that there's a lot of women out there nodding their heads who have suddenly discovered that whilst they may have worked from home, their kids were at school, and now perhaps they're facing the challenge of schooling from home. Which is, I think, is actually very different to the homeschooling that we're used to.
I do too, because I was going to do a podcast on homeschooling because people ask me so many questions, and I thought it's not the same because we had the flexibility, that probably a lot more flexibility, like they're being given actual work to do, whereas we've designed our own.
Yeah.
So there's similarities.
Yeah. So is there a tip? Is there something that you have learned along the way that helped to take some of the pressure of expectation off you and allow you to sort of settle in and feel a little more at ease with educating your kids at home?
Yeah, definitely. Because I started, my eldest got to the end of grade 2 in a public school, and then I decided to homeschool. And at first, you know, I started going through a distance ed school, and it was in my mind, it was school at home, which is what a lot of parents are kind of facing right now and thinking, I've got to do all the things that the teacher usually does at home for all my different children of different ages, as well as all my own work, as well as the cooking. And they're just like pulling their hair out. And that's pretty much what happened to me. I had a newborn baby. I had 3 other children, and I was trying to do everything that a teacher did at home. And I just about lost the plot. But then I started to get into the homeschool way of doing things, where it's not school at home, it's home education. And there is a difference there because you've got that flexibility to go, okay, what does my child need? What are they interested in? Let's focus on that. and you can go at their own pace, and you can, you know, I think the focus for me changed from school at home to fostering a love of learning. And that is quite a difference, because instead of, you will sit there and you will do this work and you will finish this page, and everyone's screaming and cranky and everything, it was like, okay, work on this for, you know, until you get this done or whatever, if you can. And you sit there with them, and then when everyone starts to lose it, you go, let's just go outside. Let's go cook something. Let's go for a swim. Let's go for a walk. Everyone calms down. We lay on the grass and read a book, you know, and it's a lot more flexible. So I think even for those of you who are listening that are doing school at home at the moment, they're calling it crisis schooling, and it is different. And you really can only do what you can do, and don't beat yourself up thinking I have to do every single thing on the schedule and every single thing on the plan, or my children are never going to get anywhere in life. They actually will learn really quickly in a more natural way, and also they will learn a lot, you know, when they get back into the classroom, they'll quickly all settle back in again.
Yeah, they really do. I have to say, as you were talking there, I was nodding away thinking, yes, I remember we didn't really start with any distance ed, but I certainly went through a lot of different processes before I found where we were all comfortable in our little niche. And the thing that sort of came to me more was that I really needed to focus on maintaining this beautiful connection with my children, and not being so worried about whether I ticked the Department of Education's boxes. Because my primary role is mum, and that's kind of what I needed to focus on, and all the rest sort of just flowed from there. So that's probably
and
my tip.
Yeah, and I find whenever the relationship broke down, like whenever you had a big argument or everyone was cranky because someone wouldn't do their work and mum lost her temper and blah, blah, nobody's learning during that time. And it's only when you've got that kind of calm atmosphere and everyone's happy that you actually learn. So we would do things like sit and read really good books together while they coloured or did Lego or had their morning tea or whatever, and that was school. So you know, it doesn't have to be horrible to be school. It can be fun.
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the other things too, noticing, and I've noticed particularly with my kids, because I cook a lot, not as much as you, I don't think, but I do cook a lot. And when they join in,
catering.
they really learn so much. And it's not through osmosis. I mean, you are sort of teaching them, but there's certainly the maths and the chemistry, and there's also just that vital ability to be able to sustain themselves and to understand the role that food plays in their well-being and in their life, and that it can be fun, it can be yummy, it isn't all about Brussels sprouts and broccoli, it's, you know,
but those two can be yummy too.
Absolutely, yes, you can make those fun as well, but that's part of the trick is, you know, when you have a child who has a dislike of something, how might you sway that, how might you, but they're actually learning something really quite important that they can carry through for the rest of their life. So
I remember years ago, actually back when I think Thermomix was pretty new, and I remember saying something on my Facebook page about something that I was making in my Thermomix, and someone kind of gave me a little lecture saying, you're not teaching your kids to cook, you know, by teaching them. And so I sat down and listed all the things that they had learnt, like just during that day with cooking with me. And it was things like how to cut apart a chicken, or how to thaw out a chicken safely so that you're not, you know, causing any health and safety issues. How to, what else did we do? There was how to bulk out a meal because we didn't have enough of one ingredient, so how to swap for another ingredient. There was this great big list, how to set the table, how to do, and like I said, this is what they've learnt cooking with me today. It's not just about, you know, a machine or a tool that you use in a kitchen. It's about so many things. And then the whole time we're chatting, and there's the relationship building, and there's, you know, why is this healthy and why is this not, and all of that. And it was something, I've still got it written down somewhere, and I just found it, you know, when you think through all the things that they're learning just in one cooking session, it's
Mm.
a big learning process.
It is. It's huge. It's huge. So,
Mm.
like I said, I've really found that with my kids, and I have these kids that like to dip in and dip out of going to school and coming home, and there's always that, are they going to be up to speed? But the fact
Yeah.
is that they're so willing to learn and they're so able to learn. And
Mhm.
one of the things that really surprised me, I picked up my youngest daughter who had never been to school, and she suddenly decided she wanted to try it when she was going into sixth class. And I picked her up from school one day and I said, "What was the best thing you did today?" And she just looked at me and she said, "Fractions." And I went, "Oh, I didn't expect that answer." And I'm thinking, wow. But she found them so easy. It made sense to
So
her. And I
good.
thought, it's got to be cooking. It's,
That's so good.
yeah, so it was just amazing. But, her favourite thing is fractions. So there you go. So
We did
going
when
back
we.
into that,
Sorry.
sorry, Jo, you
No,
were
you
going
go.
to say.
It's okay.
Going back into, when you're bringing your kids home, yeah, your eldest home, that you had 3 other children and a newborn baby. What was your state of health at the time?
Probably not awesome. I was definitely reacting to foods, and I hadn't. I'm just trying to think how old my youngest was at the time. Maybe it was around the time that I started changing my diet, because I think my youngest was 1 when I first went to a naturopath.
Okay.
And I had been trying to eat dairy free for a long time, since I was about 18, because I had always struggled with dairy, and a dietitian had told me, drink soy milk and take these little tablets so that whenever you have dairy you'll be not sick and all this. Anyway, so that wasn't great advice, and it didn't help me much. But as I got older, I started to understand a little bit more about healthy eating and whole foods, and I also started to work on figuring out what foods were bothering me.
Yeah.
So I think around that time I had started having more, I was really working on whole foods. I was working on some lowering the gluten,
Yeah.
and having more natural sweeteners, and I was doing dairy free. But it was a very basic understanding. Like, I was probably still at the stage of, I put spinach in my lasagna, so it's healthy.
Yeah. Yeah.
Very basic.
Yeah.
I was buying all my, for years, it's probably been, trying to think, it's probably been about 20 years. So before that, I had already started buying ingredients in bulk, every 3 months through a co-op, and trying to have more organic food, and doing all the pantry ingredients, the grains and everything, grinding my own grains, making my own breads, all of that kind of thing. So I was doing that, and a newborn, and homeschooling, and living on a farm. And I was very underweight.
Yeah.
I was very exhausted. I pretty much made everything from scratch, and I was constantly on my feet. I remember, it'd be 10 p.m. and I'd just look around the kitchen going, okay, now I have to do the dishes. I am so tired. Like, by the time you've fed the baby and you've got everyone to bed, then you've got to start cleaning up. And I just remember that exhaustion that I was feeling. But I'm a very determined person, so I still was going to homeschool. My sisters,
Still going to do it.
My sisters told me.
What were the things that helped you get through that? Because I'm sure, I'm sitting here again and I'm nodding, and I didn't have the allergy things, but certainly just that normal mum thing of a number of small children, lots of responsibility at home, wanting to cook from scratch, all of those sorts of things. And it is exhausting, let alone taking on and learning how to eat in a new way. So what were some of the things that helped you get on track and stay on track?
I think just I'm kind of stubborn. Persistent. I'm persistent. But I knew that my health was not good, and I'd been searching ever since I was like 18, trying to figure out how to be healthier, but I couldn't, I didn't quite have a handle on it. And when my kids started having the same kind of issues like underweight, constipation and diarrhea, exhaustion, the last two, I had a lot of trouble breastfeeding, and the lactation consultant said it was to do with intolerances to what I was eating. So there was a lot of screening babies, and there was a lot of I spent months pumping breast milk and supplemental feeding and all that exhausting stuff. But I think it was when my kids were so unwell that I started to really be determined to make the changes, because it wasn't just for me anymore, it was for them. And also seeing, you know, with the homeschool side of things, with all the changes there, it was seeing my daughter unhappy at school and not able to learn. And so everything kind of happened at once, as it often does, but it felt like the right time. And I was actually even more determined, since I had a newborn baby, to be at home more. It was actually easier at the time to homeschool, and I wanted to cook in a way that would help my family to be healthy. So yeah, that's what pushed me into all those changes all at the same time.
Yeah. Kind of a bit of an all or nothing.
Yeah, I am a bit like that.
Yes, I'm a bit the same as well. So what were some of the initial changes that you introduced? Obviously, because it's been a 20-year journey to get to where you are today. So what were some of the initial things that you found you were able to bring in and maintain?
First, I sort of started trying to cook from scratch, from whole food ingredients as much as possible. It's funny, looking back, sugar was not the highest thing on my list at first. I didn't realize the importance of reducing sugars. And I remember I had a friend who would laugh at me because I would swap all the dairy out of recipes, but the sugar would all still be there. And she's like, it's not healthy just because it's dairy free. I'm like, oh, I'm trying. So the sugar, I was definitely addicted to sugar, and so were all my kids. And I grew up addicted to sugar. Like, I grew up drinking sweet iced tea. My parents are Texan, and that's what we drank all day long. We didn't drink water, we drank sweet iced tea. And baking and cookies and cakes and desserts every day, homemade. So I had to learn to pull back on the sweets and to use natural sweeteners. After I sort of had gotten the dairy-free thing down pat, I started to work on the gluten-free, because I felt that was probably also an issue with my gut health. My naturopath tried to explain to me about how to start working on healing leaky gut. And one of the things he said was, take out the gluten, take out the dairy, take out the sugar. So I remember doing a month or 3 months, I can't remember, really strict, gluten-free, dairy-free, sugar-free. And we saw such a great improvement. But afterwards it was kind of like, we'll just have a little bit because we're doing so well. And then it becomes this roller coaster of doing well and then bringing a few things back in and then going downhill. And so it took a long time to really start going steadily up. And I think that it wasn't really until Isaac got really sick, my son, when he was 13, that I started to really understand the importance of gut health, and that it wasn't about just taking out foods so that you'll feel better and then leaving those foods out for the rest of your life. It wasn't going to help long term to do that. It was an actual healing process that needed to happen, not just a avoiding foods process. So that's when real healing started to happen, was when we started to work on changing over to a healing food diet.
And how long did that take for you to start noticing significant improvement and change? Because it was the whole family that did it. It wasn't just you and I.
So let's see. I should probably explain it. So we went through those years of just trying to eat healthier and gluten-free, dairy-free, sugar-free, and whole food.
Mhm.
Isaac crashed at 13, just completely crashed. It felt like it was overnight.
Yeah.
But looking back, we could see the symptoms of poor gut health in all of us. And that includes food intolerances. That's one of the symptoms. And being underweight, and the constipation and diarrhea and the exhaustion and the headaches and the colds, all the things. But he had major anxiety and OCD. So he started to really struggle and just couldn't do school at all, couldn't go anywhere, couldn't sleep, screamed and cried all the time. It got to the stage where I was spoon feeding him, dressing him, everything at 13.
Yeah.
And the more I researched, the more I realized the importance of the health of the gut, for the gut-brain connection, and for the mental health to be good, you need a good, healthy gut. So the research we did, we began the GAPS diet, which stands for Gut and Psychology Syndrome, and we worked on healing the gut. So basically really nourishing foods like meat stocks, short cooked meat stocks, good fats, eggs, fermented foods, lots of lovely soft broths and casseroles and soups and stews and things like that wouldn't be difficult to digest. Pulled the starchy foods right back. No sweet things except for a tiny bit of honey. Just slowly bringing foods in as we healed. Not even any fruit at first. That was hard.
That'd be hard, very hard.
Yeah. And just really slowly bringing foods in. Never more than one new food every 3 days, until we started to see, till we could handle more and more foods. But honestly, it only took a couple of weeks for us to see changes. I remember probably about day 4 or 5, we all were just really exhausted. But then by 2 weeks, we had so much energy. It was just like it completely turned around. And within a few weeks, Isaac was just a different person. He was not perfectly well, but he was so much happier. Within a few months, he was out and about, going everywhere again. He was working at the local supermarket. He was so cheerful and happy. He started speaking on stage with me. And he's never looked back. Like, he has his ups and downs a little bit with stress and anxiety, like we all do. But he's never gone back to that horrible place that he was in back then. And the thing that I really love about how this all happened, at first the kids were really Isaac was on board totally, because he's a very much a researcher. So he wanted to know what he could do, and he read everyone else's stories, and so this was what we were going to do, and he was going to do it with his whole heart. He was right in there. He knew more about it than I did. He'd correct me on things and say, "No, Mum, we can't have that yet." And,
Wow.
Whereas the others were all like, "Oh, we don't want to do it." But then it only took, not very long before they were all on board as well, and they were feeling better. I was feeling better, and we all just were so happy we did it. So we all healed heaps in that first year, just amazingly. And we've gone on to have a full whole foods diet now, where I can eat as much dairy as I want, and I don't go crazy, but I do eat a lot of dairy, especially butter. And I don't get sick from it anymore. We can have some sourdough bread now, and we're okay with it. We're able to have so many things that before we would have really reacted to, and it's very exciting.
But that's just such a light at the end of the tunnel, isn't it? I think when you've had such food issues and such health issues, and feel like, as you say, just taking the foods out for the rest of your life, that feels like a punishment, because food's so damn good that to take things out and never be able to go back is like, oh, what have I done to deserve this? But to know that there's a pathway to actually being able to introduce these things back into your diet again and enjoy. Because food is such a pleasure.
Yes, and it should be you know, we should be able to eat a wide variety of whole foods. And if we can't, then there's something wrong that needs to be fixed so that we can work into that, hopefully. I mean, I know that some people have terrible allergies and can't get to it as far as we did. But it's amazing the stories I've heard of like kids with terrible egg allergies and dairy allergies and things like that have healed their gut and now can eat all that. And it's just amazing.
Amazing, yeah. And it's, you know, it's interesting because I actually only got to meet Isaac once. He had recovered, had been on the diet for a while and had recovered. And he's so full of beans, so full of life, and just, you know, amazing.
Yes.
It's really hard to imagine him at the low point.
Mm.
So, you know,
because he's such a cheerful person naturally and very outgoing. So for him to be at a stage where, you know, he just cried all day and couldn't go anywhere and couldn't talk to anyone, it was just awful.
Yeah. So I'll just add in here that if anybody wants to know more about Isaac's story and your journey with GAPS, that there's on your blog, your website, there's lots of information. I mean, you've got so much information out there as well and accessible to everybody. So, and I will actually pop all those details as where you can find that information and those stories for you to click onto. So, but yeah, I just sort of wanted to add that one in there. So what's the question I want to ask? It's, your recipes are so good, Jo. I was saying to you before we started recording that, you know, my personal family doesn't have a lot of food allergies or restrictions. So to come to allergy cooking has kind of been an influence through work and a little bit through extended family. And I thought I was doing the right thing, you know, sister-in-law would come over and I'd cook up something gluten-free, and it just looked so unappealing and unappetizing, and I was really grateful that perhaps it wasn't the thing that I had to choose to eat. But once I discovered Quirky Cooking, I was able to just prepare the one thing for everybody, and everybody really enjoyed it and loved it. And you've made me look like the most amazing cook over the years.
Oh, you are an amazing cook.
But it comes from having fabulous recipes. So is this something that you've have you always been able to combine foods, work with foods to create recipes that are not only really good for you but taste fabulous as well?
I had a very good teacher, my mom. We grew up cooking from scratch. Even though we had a lot of sugar, we did cook from scratch. And Mum grew a lot of things in the backyard. We bought things at the markets every Saturday. We got big boxes of produce, and Mum would just like cook everything. So we had all, like, she cooked sourdough bread and all the homemade breads, pizza bases, everything was homemade. All the cakes and biscuits and desserts were all homemade, all the meals. And we didn't have like the packet food or anything, and we were really encouraged to help with jobs around the house, including cooking, right from the time we could walk, pretty much. We didn't have a TV. I was like so embarrassed about that at school, but it was so good. And we would just be helping and doing things and creative, and I would be up on the stool next to Mum cooking, you know, from the time I was tiny. And I remember her really teaching us the concept of using what you have. And so if we had, you know, a bunch of fruit in the garden or whatever, that's what we used to cook. Or if Mum went to the markets and got given boxes of tomatoes, then she'd come home and make a heap of chutney or sauce or whatever. And so it wasn't a case of let's go and look at the latest magazines and cookbooks and find a recipe we want to make and go make it and buy the ingredients, because we couldn't afford to do that. It was, what have we got? What can we make with it? So that was really great training. And I remember once when I was a teenager, I just wanted to cook a recipe as it was written. And I didn't remember how long it had been since I'd been able to do that. And I was like, Mum, I just want to cook it like this. I just want to use all the things that are in the recipe. She's like, no, change this to this and change this. I'm like, I want to cook the recipe like it's written.
Yeah.
But now it's like, thank you, Mum. So,
yeah.
as they say, you'll thank me later.
Yeah,
But
absolutely. Yeah.
yeah, and it was actually a blessing in disguise growing up in a home where we didn't have a lot of money, because we had to budget really tightly, and we had to use what we had. And so we became very creative. And I
Mm.
remember Mum saying, like encouraging us to make up our own recipes from the time we were really small. And I remember making my own chocolate cakes, which was stodgy, and like I didn't even use a recipe. I'd just try and make it up. My dad would eat it and say how nice it was. And my older sister and I had a little metho burner. We'd go and put it in the garage, and we'd make little meals in a saucepan. And
Fabulous.
so I was developing recipes, I guess, from quite young. And food science has always fascinated me. So working out how different ingredients react with each other and what you can substitute for them, because you've got to have that similar it's got to have the similar properties to be able to be substituted. And then you've got to keep ratios right if you're baking, and all of that's always fascinated me. So I love experimenting with that kind of thing. And so when I found out there was certain foods I couldn't eat, it wasn't like a big deal. It was like, oh, okay, so what can I have? What can I make with that? And then I made up my own recipes. And that's when I started sharing them on a blog, because I was a Thermomix consultant at the time when my diet really changed. And I remember people would say to me, it seemed like every time I went and did a demonstration, I would have probably half the people there either with allergies, or a family member with allergies, or someone they know with allergies. And so I was constantly teaching them how to tweak recipes. And so, yeah, it was good to be able to share those recipes on a blog and say, well, this is how you can do it. So
Yeah. Which was fabulous. You made me look like an amazing Thermomix consultant, because I sold your books, so many of your books when they came out.
Thank you.
Because, there are a lot of people out there who need to be able to tweak their food somehow. And you don't only just provide the recipes, you actually provide a lot of information on how to substitute and things. So,
well, if you don't have all those substitutes notes in there, you get a zillion questions from people going, but I can't have coconut, but I can't have nuts, but I can't have eggs, but I can't have flour, but I can't have milk. So I try to just put them all in there.
All in there, yeah. So it's I'm nodding at a lot of what you say about cooking from a young age. I went to boarding school, so I spent a lot of my adolescence not really being able to cook, because it was prepared for me and it was vile. About the only thing I can say about boarding school food is it was really not that great. Kept you going, but that was about it.
Dear.
But I became known very quickly at uni as the foodie of the group, and I'm thinking, really? Because I never actually really cooked anything much, but it was more than pot noodles.
Yes.
So pot noodles and toast, cheese on toast. So yeah, but I'm a little bit different to you in that, I'll use a recipe and I'll cook it the way it's supposed to be the first time, and then I'll just tweak it. And then
I'm pretty much, mostly I do that because I want to see what it's meant to be like.
Yeah, and then it's kind of like I end up forgetting where the original recipe came from, because it's actually not so much like the thing that I started with anyway, because, I wanted this, or I only had this in stock, and that actually tasted better to us anyway. So it's a lot of fun to play around with. So and I guess that's something that kind of really comes through too, is just that willingness to experiment with food. Have a play with it.
Don't be scared. I remember when I used to do my demonstrations, I used to always be saying, play with your food. Don't think about that old rule, don't play with your food. You should play with your food.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yes. So just see what happens if you do this, and see what that tastes like. And if that's all you've got, then try that and have a play.
And if all else fails, you just cover it with custard or chocolate or gravy or something, and no one will know.
No one will know. Absolutely. Wrap it in pastry, whatever.
There's always a way to save it.
There is, but it's one of those things that I get asked so often is, how do you do this, or how do you know how to do that? How do you know how to do this? And I think it is just a lifetime of growing up around food and playing with it. And
it's just practice. Yeah. And being willing to experiment. Yeah. So anyone can learn to cook. I don't think that it's like so much just a talent or something. I think it's just the more you do it, the better you get the hang of it.
And the more confident you feel, the happier you are to kind of give it a
Yes.
go and try something new, and
And one thing I've really noticed is most people probably are visual learners.
Mm.
And so when they look at a recipe book, they're not inspired. And I've had people tell me that they've bought a cookbook and never made anything out of it. But when they come to like a demonstration or a seminar or watch my videos, then they're like, oh, is that it? Okay, I can do that now. So I post videos every day on my stories in Instagram and Facebook, just like the most basic things, just whatever I'm doing in the kitchen. And I've had so many people say to me, that helps me so much. I am so much more confident in the kitchen now because I'm seeing how you go, I'll just put a bit of salt in, just however much to taste, and just do a bit of this, and I don't have any of that, I'll just swap for that. And they're like, oh, I thought it would just completely fail if I did that. I'm like, no, just play with it. So yeah, it does help people to see that.
Yeah, it really does. And I think we're so lucky now to have all of this social media and access to video and all of that sort of thing to just make that so much easier. Because I end up with people, I remember the very first retreat I catered, the kitchen's very open plan, and it's got a big workbench sort of between the kitchen, cuts the kitchen and the walkway. And I'd end up with everybody just standing on the other side of the bench, sort of watching me cook. And I was
That's
very
cool.
self-conscious because I'd never done it before. And so, I'm chatting and they're asking me what I'm doing. And then I'm kind of like, well, do you want to do this bit? Do you want to do this bit? Do you want to help? And they're kind of like, yeah, absolutely. So,
So it turned into a cooking retreat.
Yeah, it did. And it kind of became part of the ongoing retreats that we did, that we would include people in actually learning how to make certain things. So again, having the Thermomix, running out of butter and having cream there, I just went, oh, well, we'll make some butter. And they're like, really? Yeah, really? So, it's very much that visual and hands-on, and people being able to see what you're doing and how you're doing.
And that comes back to our kids and training our kids at home. I've always find it really hard to understand when parents are constantly telling kids get out of the kitchen. I understand that sometimes you need them to get out of the kitchen for your sanity, but most of the time when my kids were little, they were all around me in the kitchen and I was giving them jobs to do. And even if they're not making the whole meal, they're learning so much by watching you and doing bits. And so just include them as much as you can.
Yeah. And also just confidence with things like knives, learning how to chop. It's kind of, that's something that kids need to learn. It's not something that they just automatically are able to do. So, peeling and all of those sorts of things. So
definitely.
So Jo, thank you so much for your time this afternoon. I know you're so incredibly busy with everything that's going on.
It's Friday afternoon. I slow down on Fridays.
Yay! Well, thank you. That's been to our benefit. So really glad that we've been able to catch up and have a chat. And as I said, I'll post a link to all the places that people can find you. So there's your website, there's Instagram, there's Facebook, there's your podcast.